Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to Pyramid's webinar on telecommunications in Africa and the Middle East. My name is Jennifer Baker from Pyramid, and I'm your moderator today. We just have a few announcements before we begin. This presentation will last about 40 minutes with some time for questions and answers at the end. As you can see from the bottom of the console, you are able to view more information about Pyramid and our speaker. You'll be able to email your colleagues an invite to the webinar as you watch it, as well as post interesting data points from the presentation to Twitter if you're so inclined. This is an interactive webinar, so just click on the Q&A button and type in your question. We'll try to answer all questions at the end of the presentation. However, if we do run out of time, the speaker will reply individually to your questions after the call. We will also ask for your feedback, and that form will be pushed to you at the very end. You may also access it at the bottom of your screen here. To thank you, we will send the slide deck from this webinar after we receive your form. The slides will advance automatically throughout the event, and at this time, we recommend that you disable your pop-up blockers. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please visit our help guide by clicking on the help icon below. Now, before I introduce our speaker today, I would like to tell you a little bit about Pyramid Research. Pyramid has been advising industry leaders on growth strategies for more than 25 years, and what makes us different is our analysis, which is positioned at the intersection of three main things: emerging markets, such as the Middle East, Africa, and India; emerging technologies, such as LTE, fiber, and backhaul; and emerging business models, such as MVNOs and OTTs. This analysis is powered by the bottom-up methodology of our market forecast for more than 100 countries. For example, unlike our competitors who provide general global answers by indexing data from a few select markets, we fully segment and analyze more than 100 countries and aggregate that data to build our local, regional, and global forecasts. Our regional research team provides insight into trends across the telecom value chain through a custom blend of products, including forecasts and thematic reports. Our strategic consulting group has researched and consulted on more than 120 markets. They focus on high-level engagements using a unique matrix that addresses key strategic business issues among strategy, structure, and performance, and then applied to Pyramid's areas of expertise, such as enterprise cloud services, broadband and media, and more. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker, Karam Arsal. He has more than 10 years of experience in telecom and IT research. He now manages Pyramid's Africa and Middle East team in coordinating its research efforts and setting its thematic regional agenda. Karam also contributes content on a regular basis. Thank you for your attention, and now I will hand it off to Karam.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the introduction, and welcome all to our webinar on the opportunities in Africa and the Middle East telecom markets. As Jennifer mentioned, I'm the manager for the Africa and the Middle East research and your presenter today. Let's begin with a brief overview of the scope of our webinar as well as its agenda. The scope of today's webinar is going to first include a review of growth in the AME region, then the identification of the main opportunities, and then we will finalize with an overview of the Pyramid Research's recent coverage expansion in the Africa and the Middle East region. More specifically, in the items of the agenda, we will begin by the comparison of what has been in 2008 to 2013 with what we expect will happen in 2013 and 2018 periods. Main opportunities we will visit right after are going to be in categories of access, devices, local content and apps, enterprise markets, and network investments. Once we summarize the opportunities again, we will focus on the Pyramid Research's AME coverage expansion and then move on to the questions and answers. We believe the best way to begin any sort of opportunity identification in Africa and the Middle East and an assessment of potential is to see where we are coming from. And in the case of Africa and the Middle East, we are looking at a remarkable journey. And the beginning of the journey, you can see in this slide, is in 2008 when the situation is actually not very strong. The telecoms markets were quite weak, where there were only 2 submarine cables for the entire region, one in Africa and another one in the Middle East. The mobile penetration rate was below 50%. 8% of mobile connections were on 3G. That says actually quite a lot, given that this value also includes the wealthier nations of the Gulf and markets such as Turkey. There were about 100 million internet accounts. Once again, this value also includes some haphazard and ad hoc connections on low-speed mobile networks as well. And there were almost no smartphones. 1 in every 30 handsets sold was a smartphone in the region. Of course, in 2008, this was certainly not an ideal place to be, given that a global economic crisis kicks off, while the region is also known to usually struggle with its own domestic challenges. So when we look at today, actually what we see is a story of resilience and a commitment to a path of progress in Africa and the Middle East. Now in 2013, compared to only 2 submarine cables which connected the continent outside, now we have 11 submarine cables with a capacity of more than 30 terabits. So this is about a 20-fold increase in capacity. Mobile adoption now surpassed 1 billion subscriptions and reached 80% mobile penetration. The network modernizations took place to a healthy degree, where at the moment 28% of mobile connections are on 3G or above. But also it is here important to add that commercial LTE services can also be found in more than 15 countries in the region at the moment. And again, this is not only the Gulf regions. This actually includes close to 10 countries in Sub-Sahara. Now there are 1 internet account for every 4 people, about 375 million internet accounts. And the devices are also moving in fast, and in 2013, 1 in every 3 handsets sold was a smartphone. So when we look back at 2008, introduce a global economic crisis and the domestic challenges that Africa and the Middle East usually goes through on its own, we are looking at quite an impressive response. And we believe that the growth will continue, and this impressive rise will move towards 2018. If we take the same basic 3 indicators to see what their progress is, then on the left-hand side we see that the mobile penetration will reach almost 100% by 2018, with more than 400 million new subscriptions adding to the existing billion. At the center, we see internet penetration. Internet accounts will almost double, and 1 in every 2 people will have access to an internet account. And in terms of devices, we also see that the smartphones will account for more than half of all handsets sold in the region. So basically, we are looking at, again, quite a positive picture moving into 2008. Of course, perhaps the more consequential question is where will this growth come from? We believe that the growth will come from many opportunities. However, for the sake of parsimony, we group them into 5 broad categories here. And in this slide, you can see on the left-hand side the 5 main categories that we use to describe the opportunities, and on the right-hand side, the more specific driving forces behind them. So we will begin by access, which remains still an important opportunity. And as obvious as it may seem, the fact that rural population and the low-income segments remain unaddressed is actually indicating the presence of a continuing potential. Of course, this will need to be accompanied by better incentive designs and improved regulatory regimes in the region that can enable the growth of access further. On the second, we will see the importance of data-centric devices, their growth, and the impact that they can have in the region. And here we will be focusing mainly on the current state of the low-cost smartphone markets in the region, as well as the importance of the operator strategies that are now being tailored more and more to the unique conditions of the Africa and the Middle East markets. On the third, we will see the local content and services where consideration of cultural context and sensitivities will play a major role. We will discuss mainly the understanding and responding to OTT propositions and how some of the players, particularly in the Middle East, are now taking advantage of over-the-top propositions, particularly in video. Then we will discuss enterprise markets and the role of understanding the formal and informal economies. We will quantify the potential that is hidden in informal economies so that we can have a crude understanding of the size of the potential that's being missed. And we will also discuss the design of segmented, reliable, and secure services in the region. And we will finalize by sound network investments, which will be split into two categories. One, the importance of finding the least common denominators towards sharing and collaboration when needed, such as the shared infrastructures and open access models. And we will also talk about targeted high-value rollouts where the margins and returns on investment can be particularly high. So let us start with the broadband landscape in Africa and the Middle East, and let us start with a focus on the map on the left-hand side of the slide. On the left-hand side, you see the mobile data revenue growth, the CAGRs between 2013 and 2018. The bright green categories represent countries which have more than 20% compound annual growth rate between 2013 and 18. The lighter green ones represent 10 to 20% CAGR range, whereas the yellow ones represent the 5 to 10% range. Now, there are some striking observations to make in this map. The moment we look at it, one of the conclusions that should not be drawn is that this is the highest growth is something that is reserved exclusively to countries that are coming from lower bases and lower penetrations. We see that that is not the case, and if we focus on Nigeria and Egypt, for instance, Nigeria at the corner and Egypt at the top right corner, we see that these countries, the most populous countries with actually quite rapidly advancing networks and rapidly advancing services to some degree are still going to benefit from the mobile data explosion. Now, among the 10 to 20% range, there's also some striking observations to make, and in this case I would like to draw your attention to the Middle East region, where the Gulf countries, who sometimes are considered to be highly saturated in penetration, and therefore perhaps the revenue growth opportunities may deem to be somewhat limited, are actually going to be in high growth categories where mobile data revenue will expand by 10 to 20% every year. Of course, that will come on the back of advanced networks, and this is because all of the 6 Gulf countries at the moment have commercial LTE services. However, we also see LTE commercial services emerging in the sub-Saharan Africa, and there are close to 9 countries who are currently engaged in these services. WiMAX to LTE migrations, which are quite convenient and rapid, are allowing broadband companies based on LTE to emerge and basically, to a degree, shift the landscape of competition in the region. The CDMA to LTE migrations are also about to happen, very, very close. They are imminent, so they will also again join this bandwagon of LTE migrations and the emergence of LTE-based broadband companies. And this story, therefore, is not only about growth, but it is also about a transformation of identity about these broadband companies. In one of the other cases, we see now the internet and software giants such as Google and Microsoft now taking the region very seriously and targeting rural population by providing broadband access on low frequencies, more specifically the TV white spaces in sub-Saharan Africa. Currently, there are trials going on in Southern Africa and some Eastern African countries, and the intentions of these operators appear to be quite serious, and their arrival also carries a potential to shift the competitive dynamics. Once again, the presence of these LTE broadband companies, as well as the potential arrival of the internet giants on a commercial basis, is also important, especially until 2015, when the digital dividends in Africa are scheduled across 47 sub-Saharan countries. This means that the big mobile operators of the region are to take LTE particularly seriously once that window opens, which gives the LTE-based broadband companies another year or two to focus on increasing their subscriber bases and services. So the major takeaway here, of course, is that the mobile internet penetration will rise from 19% to 40% of population. And it is also important to remind that this penetration rise and the ability of these new operators to come into the region and maybe make these migrations relatively quickly is also partly due to the regulatory regimes that allow entry to be relatively easy. So while the regulators in the region can at times make cross-border harmonizations a bit difficult, it is also to their favor that they're making entry quite easy. So in case of mobile broadband and in particularly the LTE, I would say that the places to look at, aside from the 9 countries where services already exist, are the eastern and the southern belts, and also a couple of the more developed markets such as Senegal and Côte d'Ivoire in the western belt. And also 2015 should be a year to watch very closely, because that is when Turkey and some of the Middle East and Northern African countries are expecting to go through some high-value auctions for their LTE spectrum in those years. Now, following broadband, of course, and talking about broadband doesn't really take us anywhere, because until the data-centric devices are there, then you'll only have one piece of the puzzle. And the devices end of the story has always been a challenge in Africa in particular, and that is because the data-centric devices that used to have operating systems that are aligned with the rest of the world used to be mostly PCs, which were beyond the purchasing power of many people in the region. But now that situation is changing. So 2 years ago, when Huawei Ideos came into Africa for the first time as a low-cost smartphone proposition and captured a lot of attention especially in Eastern Africa and Kenya, then everybody started paying attention to this space. But this growth didn't stop as an isolated event. Some other vendors also started taking advantage of this demand, and now today many low-cost smartphones on established operating systems aligned with the rest of the world are there to choose from around and under $100 range. And plus, now they are being accompanied by improved operator strategies. So operator-branded handsets are coming in. Some financing options, when available, are coming in. And there's still room for creativity there, because the unbanked population is quite high, especially in Africa. And make payment options to this large population remains a problem that requires a creative solution. The choices of devices such as routers, nomadic Wi-Fis are increasing the variety of use cases available for mobile data. And also, we're talking about the possibility of even local production and in some cases the very presence of it. So overall, if we look at the blocks, the two blocks on the right-hand side of the chart, the complementarity of the data-centric devices with growing mobile broadband access is going to create a switch from the loss of any voice revenue, which is the red block between 2013 and 2018. The red block represents the voice revenue decline by 3.4 billion, and the mobile data growth, service revenue growth in the same period is going to be more than 18 billion, therefore compensating the decline by more than fivefold. Now, the third part of this story. So we talked about broadband so far, and we talked about the devices. And once again, of course, the picture is not complete with content and applications. And here we would like to draw attention to how the importance of local content is now being recognized, and now we are entering a time of actual delivery and monetization. In this case, the best examples are coming from the Middle East and North African region, in fact. And what we are seeing there is that the content is now becoming less global and the imports are actually coming from either neighboring countries or countries that some consider to belong to the region anyway. So the best examples of these are the TV series such as Noor and Magnificent Century from Turkey, making a lot of noise in the Middle East and North Africa. So basically putting the Sultan Süleyman of the Ottoman Empire against John McClane from Die Hard in a way, which is another option, of course, for them. Of course, local content is less painful in content rights. It's also local content and apps mean better advertising. But above all, perhaps the most important thing to recognize in the case of the region, and in this conversation, the Middle East, is that there are very particular both everyday cultural practices as well as certain periods, certain seasonalities that need to be recognized in order to address these areas accurately. So, for instance, the Ramadan media and telecommunications consumption habits changed dramatically with the rest of the region, and the operators or anybody who would like to invest in the region should be aware of them. Another part of this story where on one side we have the importance of local content, the emergence of local content, and on the other side we have now different delivery mechanisms that are being taken seriously. And here we are mainly describing over-the-top video propositions. Over-the-top video basically became too big to ignore in the Middle East and North Africa now, and both operators and media players are moving into this proposition. So some of the very strong operators of the region, like Etisalat, Mobily, Etisalat's Saudi arm, as well as Türk Telekom TV Bu service in Turkey, Telecom Egypt Live in Egypt, Saudi Telecom's Envision proposition in Saudi Arabia, are all examples that the major players in the region are taking this very seriously. On the other hand, some other broadcasters, other pay TV providers like Al Jazeera Sport and OSN are also in the picture, providing their over-the-top video services. And interestingly, some pure play OTT video services are also coming in, and iCflix is an example of this. And as its name could suggest, it alludes to Netflix, but one that appeals to the Arab world. Of course, the benefits are very, very big for the operators of the region, so they can capture quick revenue from non-TV devices. They can improve stickiness by having quality multi-screen strategies. They're being used to preempt global players' arrival, and by global players we mean companies like Netflix and LoveFilm. So before they enter the region, they make their mark. It is also a way to expand footprint by using each other's networks. This is both domestic and even though it's not very trivial, one can also do that internationally and certainly more quickly internationally as well. And in terms of where to look about how the local content and over-the-top propositions are emerging is that aside from the Middle East and North Africa, I think in general it is time to look carefully at whether the global OTT providers are entering the region. And indeed 2014 may be the year when that starts happening. And also at the same time, we do not want to reserve the importance of video content and local content only to the Middle East, but we're also seeing some examples that are coming from the Sub-Sahara, where examples such as DSTV and iRocco are making some noise. In terms of an unaddressed segment, perhaps the informal economies remain the biggest opportunity. It remains the biggest opportunity, but one that is also proven to be almost impossible to capture so far. But the importance of this has to be recognized. And if we look at the pie charts at the top of the slide, then we see that in both employment and GDP, the role of informal economies cannot be denied. In informal employment, we look at ratios such as 75% to 80% in Sub-Sahara, and in GDP contribution in Sub-Sahara again, the ratio is about 50 to 60%. In Middle East and North Africa, the impact is less, however, certainly considerable yet again, where 1/3 is a crude measure for both employment and GDP contribution by the informal employment. We are entering a period where trying to address this difficult to address segment through blanketing prepaid offers will not work anymore. It is not a good time to shoot in the dark, and it is a better time to actually try to understand the size, the verticals, the use cases, as well as some of maybe the pain points in informal economies to understand them and to design secure and reliable services for them. Now, the size of the opportunity which can be captured is indeed massive. For instance, in one of the recent studies that we conducted, we saw that mobile penetration in the AME region in formal employment was somewhere between 10 to 20%, depending on country. This would show some slight variations. And each business subscription, again with slight variations across countries, would generate between 7 to 10 times higher ARPs than the market average. Now, assuming that a similar penetration rate were captured in the informal economy, and only a modest ratio of twice as high as market average ARPs was being considered, then currently today the entire mobile services revenue would have expanded by a remarkable range of about 8 to 10%. So we are looking at somewhere around 9 to 10 billion extra dollars that could be captured if the informal economies were addressed adequately with just a twice as high as ARPS ratio. So the opportunity there is really big, and it also remains very difficult to capture because the understanding of the segments, the use cases, a genuine attention to pain points has not been there so far. And in the last category, we want to focus on the network investments. And in network investments, on one hand, a search for the least common denominator, and on the other hand, targeted rollouts, high-value targeted rollouts. Now, in the important thing here is that whenever the least common denominators are sought after, and whenever some operational consolidation is considered, it is important to remember that this is a very, very big opportunity for operators actually. As they reduce their concerns on network rollouts, this will translate to targeted services for end users. It will improve segmentation. It will increase the urgency for new services and innovation, which is where we believe the operators would actually like to be. So there are opportunities there to advance in access technologies while avoiding unnecessary costs by shared networks, open access models, joint rollouts, and even using certain third-party networks as well. And we are not only talking about a consolidation on assets that are moving towards commoditization, but we are also looking at some sharing, some collaboration in building of new networks. In both developed and developing markets. So for instance, there are some initiatives on shared LTE and FTTH networks in Israel, Qatar, Kenya, Rwanda, Nigeria, Ghana, and examples are always there. In Israel, for instance, the 5 mobile operators have split into 2 camps where there will be 2 shared major LTE networks in play. In Qatar, the incumbent and the alternative operator are now collaborating to build the fiber infrastructure so that they can focus on service development and innovation. In Kenya, LTE is being considered to be deployed on a consortium, while some other vendors are also considering augmenting by their own networks to work on a wholesale basis. In Rwanda, a player which is not even in the region, actually it's Korea Telecom is engaged in building the LTE network so that the operators of the region can use it. So this is of course related to the fact that the competitive dynamics of the region are also something to consider when it comes to achieving these opportunities, to pursuing these opportunities. Immediate places to look at in this case are the Eastern and Southern Africa region in general, where such infrastructure sharing activities will happen most. And another important thing to note here is that there are some maybe a different type of players where vendors are considering building the networks for the operators without an alliance with a particular operator, and even non-regional players coming in to build the networks. This will not render the importance of having strong and targeted rollouts, high-value rollouts. And one opportunity that we see is in FTTH in North Africa. In one of the recent studies that we did, when we considered the demand characteristics, the pricing economies, the geographical properties, as well as the existing network states across the different countries, we noticed that the select cities in Egypt, Algeria, and Tunisia were very favorable conditions for high-value FTTH deployments, and they could even bring twice as fast return on investment than what has been achieved in the Gulf region and in the fiber rollouts in Turkey. So it will be a combination of both, seeking the least common denominator when possible, and going after targeted rollouts after high-value customers such as FTTH in North Africa. So while we visit these 5 major categories, we would like to remind that while the opportunities are there, these primary opportunity categories are there, they are only as valuable as the filters that can assess them even more accurately and granularly depending on the unique market conditions. So when it is indeed time to invest, and when there is going to be slight variation across how each of these dimensions are different in their parameters, according to the particular countries, that needs to be done through research and understanding of better competitive dynamics, differences in regulatory contexts, demand conditions, technology states, as well as banking and formality. For instance, network investments, whether sharing is or any sort of collaboration is possible and who will do it will depend immensely on an understanding of competitive dynamics and whether there can be some deadlocks that need to be broken across some aggressive competitors. Similarly, the case for regulatory contexts. For enterprise markets, for instance, the presence of banking and formality as well as the demand conditions, a genuine understanding of the use cases of the informal economy can play a major role and show variations depending on the markets. Therefore, we believe that the opportunities need to be assessed in light of the unique market conditions, which will turn into sound investments and a strong AME portfolio. And this is one of the reasons why we expanded our coverage recently in Africa. And we remain committed to the region, and we want to show it by the doubling of our country coverage in Africa. Now, if you look at this map, the light red countries are the countries that we added to our coverage in the last 2 years. So one thing that you may notice is that some of these countries overlap with the bright green countries where mobile data explosion was shown in the beginning of the slide set. So it is very important to understand the unique conditions of each market. It is very important to understand that the Eastern Sub-Sahara varies considerably from the Western Africa. Even within Eastern Africa, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda are all different dynamics. So while these relatively broad opportunity categories are there and they are there for the taking, specific implementations will require a close attention to individual market attentions. So we have 33 countries covered now. We track more than 150 operators and thousands of contacts with regulators, operators, and vendors inform our research. A similar expansion in the Middle East. We now cover 11 markets, and within the 11 markets, now there's the entire coverage of the Gulf region, as well as the growth markets such as Iraq and the populous nations of Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia as well. So with this, I'd like to end my presentation now, and I will hand it back to Jen, who will guide you towards the questions and answers.
Thank you, Karam. And as we begin with today's Q&A period, please fill out the feedback form that is now being pushed to your screen. And just as a reminder, the slides will be sent to you via email when we receive your feedback. And your feedback is very important to us, and it's going to allow us to better serve you. So we thank you for your input. And just as a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located below on the screen, then click the Submit Question button. And now I'll hand it back to Karam to answer some questions.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, everybody, for your questions. My quick review shows that there seems to be an interest in questions about consolidation, and not only about operational consolidation, but I think we're also looking at the possibility of changes in the number of players in the region. So I see multiple questions on this, and if I categorize this only as whether there's going to be any change in the number of players in the region, then I'd like to explain this by telling you that in markets where there are more than 4 players, I think we are looking at the possibility of consolidation, especially in Eastern Africa and Western Africa. Now, So, for example, a wonderful example of this happened relatively recently in Uganda in the case of Airtel and Warit Telecom, where Uganda is known to be a very overcrowded market. There are similar markets in the region too. Tanzania is relatively crowded as well. Some of the Western African markets where the major players, thanks to their scale, are making it very difficult for some of the smaller players, and there are definitely some opportunities there as well. So overall, I think a crude rule of thumb is that once the number of players surpasses 4, the opportunities for any sort of equity consolidation also increases drastically. Of course, it takes a time for the smaller operators to put up their fight and sometimes survive. However, those are the places to usually look at. Another question is related to some of the risks of reaching out to the informal economy, and here I'd like to focus on the accountability and traceability. So the informal economy has been a bit elusive to address, and also maybe the operators have been a bit shy from approaching them, mainly because it is difficult to keep them. The fact that they have low banking rates and low formality means that the main way of approaching them has not been much different from treating it the same as the prepaid mass markets. However, this makes it actually ever more important to come with proper services. So without contractual lock-ins, the operators need to work very hard to keep the subscribers of the informal economy at bay and with them. So I would say that the main challenge at the moment is accountability and traceability. Now, another question is related to the presence of obstacles due to lack of power, and the overall answer to this question is yes. The lack of electrical power remains a big obstacle, and it does inform some of our current forecasts too. So the relatively optimistic picture that we draw it has a ceiling which is also informed partly by the presence of obstacles about access to energy. Now, there are some good news about multiple programs happening both within Africa and in international communities about providing energy into Africa in sustainable manners. So we are hoping that those will materialize. However, at the same time, we are also aware that there's always reason to be cautious about the actual implementations and whether these will indeed come to fruition. Okay. And then another question about. So the question is about the potentials of FTTH, and to this it carries an overlap with the question that we had addressed in a previous session as well. So to come to that, so the specific question is actually whether FTTH is going to play any role in the development of broadband, and how will it play against mobile broadband. So the question to this is that the answer to this is that we need to approach it on a sub-regional basis. So we need to focus on whether mobile broadband and fixed broadband have been growing as complementarities. So this is usually the case in the Gulf countries where mobile broadband and fixed broadband access happen together, and also the similar situation in Turkey as well. And also an opportunity is there again in North Africa too, that they can still go hand in hand. Whereas in the case of Sub-Sahara, we believe that probably mobile broadband will be the way to go. And with this question, I would like to come to an end, and And I would like to pass it on to Jan, and thank you very much for your questions. Some of them I'm unable to answer due to time, but I will get back to them individually and respond to them. So thank you very much for your attendance and your questions.
Great. Thanks again, Karam. We have reached the end of our session today, everybody. Any questions that have not been answered will be collected, and our speaker, Karam, will reach out to you via email. You can also ask any questions on your feedback form. If you would like the presentation files via email, please do complete the form so we can understand how you like the presentation today. All attendees will receive an email with the on-demand version as well, as soon as it's ready. We do hope that you learn more about our Africa and Middle East coverage by downloading our overview that's available right on your event console. And also please watch out for our 2014 predictions, which will include our predictions for the year for our areas of expertise. And for more information about Pyramid, please visit pyramidresearch.com. And thank you again for attending today's webinar.